Так это все-таки показывается, что ли? Ладно, неинтересно. Да нет, ладно. Нет, вроде показывается, смотри-ка. Да наоборот, понимаешь, я не за вот это всё, я за человека, вот за людей. Даже вот не просто за людей, которые вот масса какая-то, знаешь, как бы, ну, такой, ну, толпа как бы. Ну, то есть, когда один человек, он мудрый, знаешь такую пословицу, а когда вот толпа людей, это как бы быдло, понимаешь? То есть, они агрессивные, сумасшедшие, и они там им сказали бы, они когда, все, то есть, ну, не за а вот за человека, за людей, за каждого, ну, типа, ну, в нормальном смысле просто за людей, в смысле, да. Ну, не знаю, ну, как бы просто по-настоящему как-то. Нет, просто как вот, да, за жизнь, короче, как бы, да, и вот того. Потому что политики приходят и уходят, и никто не помнит, где какие там тысячи, миллионы лет назад какие-то политики, то есть что-то там делали. Они ничего не делали на самом деле, все делали люди, понимаешь? И те, кто, да, их потомки, которые сегодня живут, да, типа, которые продолжают делами и интеллектом, более выживабельной моделью. Политики, они не модель, не политики, не войны, они ничего не делали. Они только разрушали, по идее, да. Но они как какашки на поверхности, понимаешь? А то, что выживабельное, оно как бы внизу находится, да. Этого не видно, понимаешь? И оно, потому что оно стоит труда, и не только труда, оно как бы не громкое просто. Понимаешь? Не крикливое и не поножовное, и как скажем, это самое, не такое, да. Да. Ну не все доживают, ну да, наверное. Ну и без всяких, да, ну да. Поэтому мне вообще начхать это все. Она все не настоящая. Вся политика все это говно. То есть у тебя одна единственная жизнь, ты, даже если ты политик, все равно. То есть, да, понимаешь. Да, да, да. Ну, тем более, да. Ну, вот и думай, как прожить одну жизнь свою единственную. Ну, типа того. Ну, да. Ну, жи как скот тогда, жи как. Все равно тебе придется что-то делать, согласен? То есть где-то работать, какие-то деньги получать. Тогда ты будешь либо ненавидеть этот мир и делать, да, и жить, то есть я где-то работаю, деньги зарабатываю, а моя жизнь настоящая это поэзия какая-нибудь, типа того. Либо, да, ну понимаешь, да, да. Ну получается, ну а что теперь сделать? Да, ну, кто сказал, что это, ну получается, ну это не важно. Ну, даже, ну, это всем насрать, блин, никто, да. Ты же себя голова, ты сам, никто тебе ничего не укажет. Да. Даже у женщины тоже так. Как вы. Губер. Граубер. Ну ладно. Ну, ну нет, он понял тебя, да. только, да. Да, вот это, я понял. Ладно, да, сейчас так делаем. Ну да, да, вот он, да. Вот это он имеет, да. Ну, да, ну ты есть на самом деле, да. Ну, он даже нет. Ну, он понял тебя просто. Да. Ну да, 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 да. Ну да, да, да. Мотивационный видео. Ха-ха-ха. Да неужели это так, да? Да нет. Да нет, да. Ну вот. Да наоборот, потому что, да. Я уж думал, что забыл меня. Да. Ну наоборот, да нет, понимаете. Uncharted, да. Наверное, ну я так думаю, это как бы когда я прихожу, они, наверное, да, не очень хорошо на это реагируют, я так думаю, наверное, или наоборот, да. Ну это есть на самом деле, ну да. Мне легче думать-то. И тут что тут такого? Я же ничего не показываю такого. Ну да, это вот, это ладно, это наработаешь, что у тебя, это ладно. Да. Ну, piece of art, говорит. Ну да, понял. Нет, это не считается. Ты мне такой жизни, что ли, желаешь? Если это piece of art, где мои деньги из него? Кому я, да. У меня ни образования, даже ничего нет, просто, да. Нет, я не собирался, просто такой эксперимент, как бы. Ну, да не то, что так, вот, просто квантовый, да, это проблема, да ладно, не важно. Ну, наверное, заодно, да. Нет, если смотри, если ты тогда, ну да, да. Ну, одно другому не вредит, наверное, ну, тогда наверное. По-другому себя вести, может, надо чуть-чуть. Было. Возможно. Нет, это не оскорбление, здесь просто, ну да. У меня такой цели нет. Если у меня одна цель музыкантом быть, конечно, да. Ну, я имею в виду, вот, быть это, вот я имею в виду, да. Да, как бы, что хотите, ты не сможешь одновременно все уметь, понимаешь, и во все вложиться сложно будет, я думаю. Ну, как бы, как попутка, но, да, зачем, ну, ладно, смотри сам. Может быть, да. Ты правильно понимаешь, смешные разговоры, почему смешные? Денег нету, потому что. То есть это все как. Ну, это все равно, что ты вот будешь голодный сидеть, я тебе буду что-то рассказывать, и ты это как бы просто оскорбительно даже в каком-то, понимаешь? Ну, в том смысле, что. Как вот объяснишь-то? Да, ну он это имел в виду, нет, ну да. Ну да, да, так я смотрю, что за бред, да? Ну вот это мне, наоборот, тогда, да, а вот это, ну, вот это он есть. Наоборот, как, ну, даже интересно.
This is the road down which Russia's war of annihilation will
Ой,
emerge.
ладно. Так, надо еду поесть. Будешь еду есть, нет? Сначала готовить. Гарса. Дитячий столбин. Підвали не буде. Ні, не надо это. Приходи ко мне. Блин. Народ, да нет.
And its emptiness speaks only of what is to come from Russian-held Kherson up here to the vital port of Mykolaiv. They know what it is to be in Russia's way. Out of 18 homes, 10 are left in our village, she says. No electricity, gas, water or heat. The only ones left are those who can't leave, another adds. They're young, edgy, guns raised, unsure who we are. Press written on our vests and our press cards slowly calms them down and they apologise. But this is not an army in full control of its destiny. The trenches are where the rockets land every night. Some are from Odessa, Moscow's eventual target here. Others from just down the road.
You're saying his house is just over there.
It's important to see what tools Ukraine has been left with by a world that seems so concerned. They fight for their homes, but tell me they captured Russians who seemed unaware why they were even here. They said they can't understand what's going on. They can't go back, because back there they're being shot for retreating, so they advance or surrender.
Серьезно? Слушай, вот на самом деле, да, получается...
But unbroken morale takes different forms. And this is a police chief driving a birthday gift to the governor with a captured Russian machine gun soldered onto it. It does not distract from the seriousness of the twilight world in which his colleagues work. Any drunk or man changing his car battery after curfew could be a Russian saboteur, they fear. There really is no way to check by looking at phones and in trunks. The city is dark, bar their lights and the flash of the distant enemy's bombs. An urgent hospital call for blood has gone out. They rush to help. The savagery of Russia's targeting measurable in how dark this four-floor hospital keeps itself at night. Invisible, not from a power cut, but to avoid Russian bombs. Mykolaiv has been fearing encirclement for days. There is heartbreak for those who leave. Amid the shared agony, still a tussle to get on to buses to Moldova. The men stay.
This my wife, Xenia, and my daughter, Varvara. She gave no Poland. Because after combat, of course, after combat, what will you do? I go to the... This is my country. This is my country. What I was doing? Go to the Poland? No Poland. This is my home.
And there is heartbreak for those who stay. Svetlana lost her husband in a rocket attack Sunday that killed 9 outside a shop. The violence here is a chain of moments of blinding grief.
И тут мгновение ракета. И мужа моего просто разорвало. Он захлебнулся кровью. Он в крови, в луже крови лежит до сих пор там еще. Лежит там. А меня забрали. Я скоро ракету кинуть.
To wander alone. Nick Payton Walsh, CNN, Mykolaiv, Ukraine.
Peter Zalmayev is the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, and he joins me now from near Kyiv. Thanks for being with us. You're staying in the country. You've told our producers you have no intention of leaving. What's morale like right now among Ukrainians near the capital?
Well, this is what you heard in the previous segment. The boys say, I don't want to go to Poland. This is my country. As brutal and as barbaric as the bombardment of Ukrainian cities has been, there's no question in Ukrainians' minds that what they're fighting for. They're fighting for their home. They're fighting for their future. They absolutely reject any idea that Russia will be imposing its own system, its philosophy of life and governance on Ukraine. If there was ever a doubt about Ukrainians' identity, about Ukrainians willing to live in a liberal democracy, those doubts have disappeared once Russian tanks started crossing the Ukrainian border on the morning of February 24th.
So you must have some concern for your family's safety, but despite that, and I'm hearing that from many Ukrainians, by the way, that we're talking to here in the western part of the country, I guess your position is, this is my country and I have no intention of becoming a refugee, because you're an American Ukrainian. So you could legally leave, but you're choosing not to.
No, I'm choosing not to. Obviously, this is supposed to be. Right now, Vladimir Putin is trying to, he said he was trying to impose control over all of Ukraine when he talked to President Macron and Erdogan of Turkey. I don't think he has the forces to do that, but he certainly has the forces to keep terrorizing the whole country. It's a calculated risk, obviously, for me to remain in Ukraine. But I believe that Ukraine shall prevail. I have no doubt in my mind, and there will be a lot of need, for folks like me to try to bring it up to speed, to try to start rebuilding Ukraine, to try to bring back the millions of Ukrainians that have left. It's estimated that already Ukraine has suffered close to $100 billion of damage. Much more is expected, obviously, as Vladimir Putin escalates his campaign of terror. He is clear that he has suffered significant setbacks on the field, military-wise. He has no plan. His only plan is to keep terrorizing civilians, to try to bring Ukrainians to their knees.
Right, but that's not going to be enough to take over the country, to continue to occupy it. What do you see as a possible off-ramp for Putin's military here? Because where is the potential exit here? If Vladimir Putin at some point realizes, because some people say he's maybe even a bit delusional about his army's advances in Ukraine, but at some point, what if he realizes this is not a fight that he can win militarily? Where is the diplomatic
Вообще
open
подлая
door?
штука, да,
How do
если
you foresee,
сейчас
what does
сидят
that
там все
look like
новости озвучивают.
potentially?
Well, everyone is
Так это вообще просто ничего нет, что ли? Сейчас сидят и вот все.
Mr. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has already done so. He has declared his willingness to consider the neutrality status for Ukraine, consider NATO plans. This is ostensibly Vladimir Putin's demands, even though I don't believe that's really been the case. It's the NATO expansion thing is more of a red herring for Vladimir Putin, and this is a war of conquest for him. But the Ukrainian side is definitely, trying to play the initiative in this process. Zelensky will be addressing members of Congress. So while he's sending these signals diplomatically that he's willing to sit down and actually offer Mr. Putin an off-ramp without a muscular show of strength, Vladimir Putin will not sit down. So we're talking about bolstering Ukraine's defenses, which include possibly providing Ukraine with Russian-made surface-to-air missile defense systems. Since Washington has pretty much ruled out Ukraine's request to close the airspace. So that is the next step, the next best option that Washington must do to help Ukraine.
even more support from the United States now after this 15 minutes long speech he just delivered.
I mean, you mentioned some of these big, powerful points that he evoked there in this speech, Mount Rushmore and Martin Luther King, I have a dream. He also spoke about the big national traumas of the US, Pearl Harbor and 9/11, compared that to make it comparable to what Ukraine is now experiencing. Do you think he was not only speaking to lawmakers there, but also was trying to win the hearts and minds, if you will, of the average American citizen?
Absolutely, and I'm sure he did. I mean, there won't be any American who is watching this speech or hearing his words who is not hit in his heart, as you just said. Gerhard mentioning 9/11, all the other big dramas, this is resonating within the American soul, and with that he wants to put even more pressure on President Biden to deliver more defense aircrafts. And from what we hear from the Biden administration, this is kind of the number one topic, and it seems that they really will send more defense aircraft to the Ukraine. The big question probably is if they come in time.
Yes, he was asking very explicitly for weapons. He also asked for surface-to-air missiles, the S-300 missiles, but also he asked for new sanctions on Russia, more sanctions, and on all politicians there who still do not speak out against the war, the Duma members. Furthermore, he asked that all US companies must leave Russia, to close US ports to Russian goods. Those are all sort of little steps of escalation, if you will. How likely is it that the US increases these sanctions?
He really used the stage to kind of reach everyone in this huge big country, right? He definitely tried to or he definitely addressed it to Joe Biden himself, to the president and to the lawmakers, but as you just said, he specifically spoke directly to shop owners, saying that they should close their shops in Russia, saying that like Russian money or everybody who is kind of supporting the Russian market has blood on his hands. Yes, he's asking for higher, stricter sanctions. We hear that there are debates whether Chinese banks who are doing business with Russia should be also sanctioned from the US. This is something the White House obviously is also discussing. So yes, he leaves no doubt, and I think this video underlined it, that the situation in Ukraine is just horrible, and he needs every possible help from the whole world, especially from the strong and powerful United States, to end it as soon as possible.
Нет, так чего вы переживаете? Я вот про это и говорю. Да. Ладно.
In Washington, they're reporting for us. Thank you very much, Ines. Russia, meanwhile, is escalating its attacks across Ukraine. Russian forces are reported to be intensifying fighting in the suburbs of the capital and have also stepped up their bombardment of Kyiv. Emergency services say at least 2 people were injured in new strikes on the city this morning.
For residents of the Ukrainian capital, every passing day brings further shelling, more homes lost, and more casualties. Is she alive? Yes, she's alive. Get her in the car. A citywide curfew was imposed on Tuesday and will last until Thursday morning. Ahead of the curfew, people rushed to the stores to stock up on food and supplies. The situation in the city is not bad. People are holding up. We're supported by the volunteers and the territorial defense.
По подвалам, значит, наверное, что?
Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky said he saw hope for compromise in talks between Russia and Ukraine, even as Moscow stepped up its assault.
Ну, это риторический вопрос. Имеешь ли ты право распоряжаться своей жизнью
It's difficult,
Как
but
бы
important,
так
because
так
any
запросто
war ends
сказать.
in agreement. The meetings continue. As I'm told, the positions in the negotiations sound more realistic. However, there still needs to be more time for decisions to be in Ukraine's interests.
On Tuesday, leaders from 3 EU countries visited Kyiv, bringing a message of support. They reiterated their desire to give Ukraine a way to join the EU as soon as possible.
I hope it should be agreed over the next couple of days or weeks, and the candidate status should be given till the end of this year. Thank you.
The capital bracing for the next round. This medical team has set up a field hospital in a bomb shelter for the worst case scenario of having to treat the wounded here. The people of Kyiv know their ordeal is far from over.
Well, for more, let's bring in our correspondent Alexandra von Naum. She's in Lviv in western Ukraine. Alexandra, there's been increased shelling in and around the capital, Kyiv. What's the situation there? What are you hearing?
Kiev is under a curfew that was announced yesterday, with the city's mayor urging all residents to seek shelter, to take cover, because the Russian forces are apparently intensifying their attacks on the Ukrainian capital. We know that heavy fighting is going on the outskirts of Kiev. We know that there were explosions in the city center. There are also reports about Russian missiles striking apartment building that is quite close to the center. So this 12-floor apartment building was apparently struck, and first responders were trying to get people out of the apartment. Some of them were on fire this morning.
As I said, you're in Lviv, that's in the west of Ukraine, where it's relatively quiet. But are people there worried that the violence, the shelling, the bombardments will soon reach that part of the country as well?
They are worried, of course. They are scared. Many told me that they think that it's just a question of time before the war will come here as well. We just have to remember that only a few days ago, a military training center just 30 kilometers away from Lviv was struck by Russian missiles. So people are scared, and we just have to stress the importance of Lviv. That's not only an important hub for aid deliveries towards the eastern part of the country, but it's also a place where many people flee. They flee the fighting in the eastern part of Ukraine, and then they move on to travel on across the border to Poland or other European nations.
Alexander, we heard in our report there that President Zelensky is more optimistic. He said he believes Russia may now be more open to negotiations, that their position might, as he put it, be more realistic now. What are we to make of that?
Well, he really sounded cautiously optimistic, suggesting that Russia has
бросайте все базы, и все. Ну, что, не так, что ли?
We also heard from some senior members of the negotiating team. One of them said that there is room for compromise. However, he also added that there are still big differences, contradictions between the two sides. We know that what is at the table, apparently both sides are discussing that, is a future neutrality of Ukraine. And according to past statements, that could be something that the Ukrainian government could be potentially ready to discuss, with President Zelensky saying that Ukraine has to accept that it will not become a member of NATO despite the open door policy of the alliance. But of course, both sides seem to be still far apart with regards to their positions.
DW correspondent Alexandra von Naum there. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Time now to have a quick look at some of the other developments in this conflict. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is holding talks in the United Arab Emirates and later in Saudi Arabia to encourage oil producers in Gulf states to increase output. He's hoping to reduce the West's reliance on Russian oil and gas. Britain, like much of the West, is facing spiraling energy prices. 2 journalists working for the US network Fox News have been killed in Ukraine. Irish cameraman Pierre Zakashevsky, seen here at the front of this picture, and Ukrainian producer Alexandra Kovshinova died when their car came under Russian fire outside Kyiv. At least 4 journalists have died covering the conflict so far. Credit rating companies say Russia may be on the verge of defaulting on its foreign currency debt if the national sanctions have
Ну, это
limited its
естественно.
ability to access
То
foreign
есть ты же не
exchange
будешь говорить,
reserves.
что... Ну, наоборот, он тебя просто понял. Ну, смотри. При такой позиции, если у тебя корреспондент уезжает на фронт, неважно к кому, понимаешь? И если ты как бы за ту позицию, которая... А там по ошибке, или как там убивают свои же его, ты никогда не скажешь, что ты скажешь, враги убили в середине, то есть как бы, естественно, понятно.
Moscow is due to pay more than $117 million in interest on sovereign bonds on Wednesday, with more payments looming later in the month. Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov has said that he sees, quote, some hope for
Ну,
reaching a
пока война
compromise
идет,
in
то точно.
negotiations
То
with
есть война, правда, точно не
That's
любит это
after
однозначно.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also
Ну,
sounded a
гипотетически так,
positive note
конечно, да,
on the
понимаю,
ongoing
да.
talks. In an interview with Russian TV channel RBK, Lavrov said that a neutral status is being seriously discussed in connection with security guarantees. There are concrete formulations that, in my view, are close to being agreed. Let's now bring in Michael Barsicu, a global affairs analyst with the Atlantic Council. Let's start with this, Michael. Ukraine and Russia are now indicating that there's hope for a compromise to end the war. What do you think that would look like?
Well, if you had asked me this very same question a month ago, I would have said the Ukrainian population has zero appetite for a compromise, especially if it came to putting aside its bid to become a member of NATO or the EU. Now we're looking at a nation that in many parts of Ukraine, as your correspondent indicated, has been bombed into submission, and the bombing continues in places like Kyiv. But it has to be said, I cannot overestimate this enough, that there's a lot of anger here on the streets in Lviv and elsewhere. There's a lot of arms in the hands of people. People are thinking back to the Maidan times of 2013 and 2014 and saying we did not spill our children's blood for nothing. We did not show up there for nothing. So this could spiral out of control very, very quickly given the current atmosphere. So I think Zelensky is in a very, very tough spot. Just quickly, there is, of course, an appetite, a very big appetite for the war to stop. But I actually predicted this some time ago that Zelensky may be pressured by Western allies to go to that kind of compromise. It's a very dangerous route indeed.
Let's go one step further. If there is any kind of compromise or negotiated settlement, a peace deal even, who will be guaranteeing that?
Well, that's a good question. And, you know, as much as the Russians may be trying to show their good side, diplomatic side, whatever you want to call it, in these talks, they're not to be trusted. They weren't to be trusted in the, you know, the guarantee of the safety of people fleeing in those humanitarian corridors. There's now fears that they're not doing well on the battlefield, so they may actually escalate their use of shelling, escalate use of banned weapons, and possibly even turn to chemical weapons. So we're in very, very dangerous uncharted territory at the moment.
Is Ukrainian President Zelensky in a strong enough position domestically to agree to any kind of negotiated settlement? You mentioned the anger in the country before.
Yeah. Well, his popularity ratings are at an all-time high. He has surprised his most fiercest critics in terms of stepping up to the plate and becoming a war president. There's no training, you know, to become a wartime president like he has. He's done extremely well. He's stood up to the Russians, the second biggest army in the world. But again, because of the various delicate conditions that we're facing right now, with this anger, with the high death toll, with the degree of destruction, it's very, very difficult to predict whether he'd get enough support from Ukrainians to at least temporarily shelve the NATO bid. I think maybe that could be a kind of compromise if Zelensky told his people that this is a temporary thing, just for us to regroup, get the Russians out, stop the bombing, and rebuild, but remains to be seen.
Michael Bosicue there from the Atlantic Council think tank, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You're watching DW News. Here's a recap of the latest developments in the Ukraine war. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeated calls for a no-fly zone in a video address to the US Congress. He appealed to US companies to leave Russia, which he said were financing the war in his country. Invoking the turning point that saw the US join the Second World War, he told Congress, "Remember Pearl Harbor, we need you now." Meanwhile, Russia is stepping up its attacks across Ukraine. More strikes have hit a residential area in the capital, Kiev. Ukraine says Russian forces
Я же вам
are
сказал,
forcing attack.
Зеленский Третью мировую хочет начать. Так он повторяет, говорит.
Second
А
largest
что не так,
city.
что ли?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says peace talks with Russia have become more
Ой, всем так прикольно будет, да. Ой, вообще. Веселуха.
could be close. And that's it from me and this team for now. Phil Gale.
Интересно жить будет.
Don't forget, you can get in-depth round-the-clock coverage of the war in Ukraine on our website, that's dw.com, and on our social media channels, that's Instagram and Twitter. Our handle there is
Сами расхлебывайте, да.
Thanks for watching.
Every day counts for us and for our planet. Global Ideas is on its way to bring you more conservation. How do we make cities greener? How can in their habitats? What to do with all our waste? We can make a difference by choosing reforestation over deforestation, recycling over disposable, smart new solutions over staying set in our ways.
The Earth is truly unique, and we know that that uniqueness is what allows us to live and survive.
Global Ideas, the environmental series in Global 3000, on DW and online.
One of China's largest manufacturing hubs, all but closed for business. Shenzhen is the latest Chinese city felled by a wave of COVID-19 infections and Beijing's hard lockdown policies. That's sending ripples through global markets. Also on the show, Intel makes a major bet on the future of European tech. The US chip maker pledging for a build-out across the continent, including a manufacturing hub in Germany. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Beardsley in Berlin. Well, the past 2 years have been a headache for global supply chains. Businesses are now bracing for more. Russia's war against Ukraine is already distorting markets. Now COVID-19 cases in China are surging once again.